You ever wonder why, when the government puts a new tax on gas companies, your price at the pump is the one that goes up? Or, hey, why government payments to farmers don't suddenly make all your groceries free? Well, it turns out that whenever the government steps into a market with taxes or subsidies, it kicks off this fascinating chain reaction, and the results are pretty surprising. All right, so how are we going to break this down? First, we'll look at what a perfect market looks like when it's just left alone. Then, we're going to throw a wrench in the works, a brand new tax. From there, we'll play detective and figure out who really ends up paying for it, uncover a pretty shocking hidden cost, and then we'll flip the whole thing on its head and see if subsidies are just the other side of the same coin. Okay, so before we can really dig into how government policies mess with a market, we got to understand how that market works in the first place, right? And really, it all boils down to these two powerful, kind of opposing forces, supply and demand. And this really gets us to the core question of this whole explainer. When the government slaps a tax on a company, does that company just eat the cost? Or do you, the person buying their stuff, end up footing the bill? Well, as we're about to find out, the answer is way more interesting than just a simple yes or no. So, first up, demand. And look, it's a really simple idea. The higher the price of something, the less of it people generally want to buy. I mean, think about it. If a concert ticket is, say, 20 bucks, you're probably in. But if it's 200, yeah, you might just stay home. And it's that relationship that gives us our classic downward sloping demand curve. Okay, so the other side of the coin is supply. And for the people making the stuff, it's the exact opposite. The higher the price they can get, the more they're going to want to sell, right? They want to maximize their profits. And that gives us an upward sloping supply curve. At low prices, maybe only the super efficient producers can make any money, but as that price starts to climb, it brings more and more sellers into the game. And this is where it all comes together. Where those two curves cross, that point is what we call the market equilibrium. You can think of it as the market's natural happy place. It's that one magic price and quantity where both buyers and sellers can agree, with nobody stepping in to interfere. So this is our before picture. Remember this. Okay, now hang on, because this is a really key distinction for everything that's about to happen. If the price of gas just changes on its own, producers will just move up or down that supply line we already have. But what if something other than the price changes, like, say, a brand new cost to produce it? Well, that shifts the entire curve. And a tax acts exactly like a brand new cost. All right, so our perfect little market is just humming along, everything's in balance. Now, let's break it. Let's introduce a disruptor. The government decides it needs to raise some money, and it introduces a tax on the producers. And let's not talk in hypotheticals. Let's make this real. We're going to use the example from our source material, a new $3 per gallon tax on gas producers. So, what happens now? Well, if you're a producer, this new tax is basically just another cost of doing business. It's no different than paying for your raw materials or paying your employees. And remember what we just said. A change in production costs shifts the entire supply curve. So in this case, the whole curve just jumps up by the exact amount of the tax, $3. There's another really cool way to visualize this. It's called the wedge method. Basically, the tax creates a $3 gap, a wedge, between the price you pay at the pump and the money the producer actually gets to keep. The market is going to shrink until it finds a new quantity, the exact spot where that vertical gap between the two curves is exactly $3. It's like the tax literally wedged the two sides apart. Okay, so the government sent the bill to the gas companies. But hold on, we've got a new higher price for us, the consumers, and a new lower amount of money for the producers. So who is actually carrying the weight of this $3 tax? This is the mystery of what's called tax incidence. And this might be the single most surprising thing you hear today. It actually doesn't matter who the government sends the bill to. For real. The laws of supply and demand, not the government, are what ultimately decide who shoulders the burden of that tax. So just to be super clear, we've got two different ideas here. There's legal incidence. That's just who has to physically write the check to the government. In our case, it's the producer. But then there's economic incidence. And that's the real question. Who's actually worse off? Who really feels the pain of this tax? Let's actually look at the numbers. So before the tax, the price was $4. Simple. After the tax, you, the consumer, are paying $5 at the pump. That's $1 more out of your pocket. Meanwhile, the producers, after they pay the government, they're only keeping $2. That's $2 less for them. So wait a minute, your $1 price hike plus their $2 loss, that adds up perfectly to the $3 tax. It got split between you. But the story doesn't end there, not even close. Because beyond just moving money around between us, the producers, and the government, this tax has another kind of invisible effect on the overall health of the entire market. Let's zoom out and look at the whole economic pie here. Economists call this market surplus, but really it's just the total value that everyone, consumers and producers, gets from this market even existing. Before the tax, the whole pie was worth, say, $12 million. Afterwards, well, when you add up the new, smaller slices for consumers and producers, and you add in the new slice for the government, the whole pie is suddenly only worth $9 million. Hold on, $12 million down to $9 million. Where did that other $3 million go? It didn't go to consumers, it didn't go to producers, it didn't even go to the government. It just vanished. Poof. This is the true hidden cost of the tax. It's called deadweight loss. So where did that value go? Well, this little triangle on the graph, that's it. That's the deadweight loss. What it represents are all the sales that would have happened if the tax wasn't there. You know, deals that would have made both a buyer and a seller happy. But because of the new price, they just don't happen anymore. It is pure lost economic activity. Okay, let's totally flip the script. We've talked about the government taking money out of the market. What happens when it puts money in? I'm talking about a subsidy. It sounds like the perfect, happy opposite of a tax, doesn't it? Well, let's see about that. So, what is the subsidy? It's basically a payment from the government to either a producer or a consumer. The whole point is to lower costs and get more of something to happen. For what we're doing here, you can just think of it as a negative tax. Simple as that. And just like a tax, a subsidy also creates a wedge. But instead of driving it in from the top, it shoves it in from the bottom. And the result is a perfect mirror image of a tax. Consumers end up paying less than the natural market price, and producers end up receiving more. It looks like a win-win, right? Everybody's happy. And here is the final, crucial twist. Even though a subsidy encourages more stuff to be bought and sold, it pushes the quantity past the natural equilibrium. It also creates a deadweight loss. Now, why on earth would that happen? Well, it's because the subsidy encourages deals to be made where the real cost to produce something is actually higher than what the consumer truly values it at. Society's basically paying to make transactions happen that aren't really worth it from an efficiency standpoint. So what we're left with is this fundamental trade-off. We've seen that pretty much any time the government intervenes, whether it's taking money out with a tax or putting it in with a subsidy, it creates this hidden cost, this inefficiency. So the real question, the big question is, when is it worth it? What goals, like funding public services or encouraging green energy or supporting local farmers, what goals are important enough to justify creating that inefficiency in the market? And that's the debate that sits at the very heart of economic policy.